It's fair to say that everyone loves a good winger, and there are some serious ballers playing in the Championship right now. In today's video, I'm going to be trying my best to rank all of them. Thanks to Hull City Refresh on Twitter, he's put together a tier list of the vast majority of Championship wingers that have played this season, and in today's video, we're going to be trying to order them all of how I rate them. This is a highly subjective video, so don't take it too seriously. If you want to have your own go at this tier list, I'll leave a link to it in the description down below. But without any further ado, let's jump in. I will preface this tier list by saying if I haven't seen any of these players enough, or if I don't feel confident enough to give them a definitive ranking, I will just put them in the haven't seen category, having not formed enough of an opinion on them just yet. But having watched the Championship for God knows how long, I'd like to think that I have a decent grasp of how good all of these wingers are, or at least in my opinion. Straight off the bat, Summerville straight into the S tier. Best winger in the Championship for me. Obviously won the Championship Player of the Season award. A little bit contentious maybe because of the Sammy Smodic shout, but definitely a worthy winner for me. He's been a game changer for Leeds this season and is definitely up there. Dan James, his Leeds teammate, would probably have in the A tier, slightly below Summerville. Don't think he's quite on that level, but definitely a player good enough to cut it in the Premier League. His goal contributions have been really solid on top of that this season as well. Another player I'd have in the A tier, Emmanuel Dennis. Had he been fully fit and played in the Championship all season, obviously joined Watford on loan in January, could be a player you could argue is pushing S tier, certainly in terms of natural ability, what he's able to do on the ball when fully fit, which I don't think he has always been this season. Really rate Emmanuel Dennis, definitely up there as one of the best players in the Championship for me. Borja Sainz at Norwich City, I'd probably have in the A tier. Very tidy player, always capable of scoring a banger as well. Johnny Rowe at Norwich, he's someone who's knocking on the door for S tier. I'd probably have him in A as well. Been a bit of a breakthrough season for him. Had he not picked up that injury and missed a chunk of the season, valid argument that maybe you could chuck him into the S tier. Really impressed with him when Norwich came to Deepdale earlier this season. Came off the bench in the second half and I thought had a really positive impact. Definitely got a bright future ahead of him and a career in the Premier League in waiting. Jed Wallace is an interesting one. In years gone by, certainly during his Millwall days, would have been an A-tier player at the very least. Thought he played fairly well against Leicester. Sometimes drifts into those central positions, now can do a job as a false nine as well. I don't think he's quite at the same standard he once was though. I would have him in the B tier these days, probably. West Brom fans, would you say that's fair? Grady Diangana, a really tricky one to rank for me as well, because he's the sort of player that blows very hot and cold. When he's on it, he can be frightening. Left foot, he's nippy, can get around the man and score a decent goal or two as well. But when he's not on it, games just seem to pass him by sometimes as well. Someone who I'd probably have B tier, maybe pushing A tier. Like I say, Diangana when he's on it, an A-tier player. That's not always the case, so maybe B tier, but we might revisit that one. Asprilla at Watford, another player where he's on it, I think he's an A-tier player. Maybe that bit of inconsistency in his game because he's a little bit younger than some of these other players on this list. I'd be tempted to chuck him into the B tier. Liam Miller at North End, a player that I obviously rate very highly. Really positive impact in this North End side this season. A lot of the season been asked to play in a wing-back role as well, which hasn't always suited him. He's definitely a player that's more suited to playing higher up the pitch. Right now, I'd probably have Miller in the B tier, certainly with potential to knock on to the A tier. I just don't feel he's quite at the level of these players just yet. Very interested to see what happens with Miller in the summer though. I'm sure there will be a lot of Championship clubs interested in him. I'd love North End to get him on a permanent basis, but have a feeling someone may sneak in there before us. Brad Potts, I'd probably have in the C tier. Very solid, functional player. Don't get that many goal contributions from him though, playing the position that he does in our side. He's injured at the moment. I would like him to be getting a few more assists. Crossing at times can be a little bit inconsistent, but a solid player nonetheless. Robbie Brady at North End. We'll do all the North End boys now, why not? Probably have him in the C tier. Based on the first half of the season, I'd have probably had him in the D tier, but I do think he's improved over these last few months. Not on the standard of these players up here anymore. Obviously, in the twilight year years of his career now, but still capable of producing something from that left-hand side. Tom Ince at Watford, I think his best days are behind him. I am going to chuck him into that D tier. Sorry, Tom Ince. Andre Green at Rotherham, another player I'm probably going to chuck into that D tier as well. Had a short stint at North End that didn't really go to plan. Start of this season for Rotherham as well, got injured, so not had that much of a sample size to judge him off, so maybe a bit harsh, but I would chuck him into the D tier for the time being. Sorba Thomas is a bit of a tough one to judge. The stats certainly back him up as being a very good player. I think so far this season created the most amount of chances of any Championship player, I want to say. Set pieces, he's usually on the money. Absolutely frightening when you are playing Huddersfield, because when he's in the mood, he can just put it into exactly that right area. In terms of his overall game though, would I have him as an A tier player? I'd probably have Sorba Thomas as a B tier player. Like I said, set piece deliveries absolutely spot on, but worth flagging up, I don't think he's had a goal contribution since the start of February now, so he's in a bit of a lull at the moment, albeit the players he's providing to haven't been the most prolific this season. But I do rate Sorba Thomas. I think he'll get a good move in the summer. I probably have him about that level right now. Jack Clarke, undeniable for me, S-tier player, one of the best wingers in the Championship. Shame he got that injury when he did and missed a chunk of the season. Sunderland certainly missed him during that time period, but when he's on it, yeah, there aren't many players better in his position in the Championship. Definitely a Premier League player in waiting, an absolute baller, no doubt about that. Anis Arouri, I don't know where to place him, because at Burnley he was so good, and I've still got nightmares about going to Turf Moor away last season. He absolutely tore us to shreds with this little nimble, nippy winger, can go off either foot, a really good fit into Vincent Kompany's system, but at Hull, he's underwhelmed a little bit. Like, you could maybe argue a lot of their January signings have. Based on this season, you'd probably have him in the B tier, but based on the Burnley days, you'd have him in the A tier at a bare minimum. So that one, I suppose, is a personal preference. I'd have him in the A tier. I do rate him. I know his time at Hull hasn't been quite up to the levels that a lot of people thought it might, but if he is back at Burnley next season, I'd fancy him to rip it up again. With that being said, Jaden Philogene is going into the S tier for me. What a signing he's been for Hull. What frustrates me about Hull at times is when they are a little bit passive in games and they've got a player as good as Philogene who stood out on the wing and isn't always as involved as he can be, but someone who's capable of creating something out of nothing. One of the best players in the Championship, no doubt about that. He gets an S tier from me. Sakamoto, I'm going to put into the S tier. Really like the look of him, especially in the first half of the season. Shame he picked up that injury when he did, but very good player with a low centre of gravity, wand of a left foot as well. Looking forward to seeing more of him next season. Steffi Mavididi, I'd have to chuck into the A tier. One of the best wingers in the Championship. Did have a relatively short loan spell at North End quite a few years ago now, where you could see he was a very raw player at the time. Final product wasn't quite there yet, but he's since moved abroad, has come back to England now at Leicester, and has been ripping it up as one of the best wingers in the Championship, and definitely worthy of that top tier. Likewise, Abdul Fatawu, I also think a S tier. I'd give him the benefit of the doubt. I think he's been as good as Mavididi this season. Not quite got as many goals, but goal contributions, he's right up there. Been one of the best creative players in the Championship this season. I think if you're going off pure right wingers, he's definitely been one of the best in the Championship in that position this season. Tyler Roberts, been fairly injury prone over these last few years. I'd be tempted to probably chuck him into the D tier maybe. Ollie Burke at Blues as well. Tempted to chuck him into the D tier. Sorry, Birmingham fans. Keshi Anderson, another one. Is he touching C tier? He's a bit of a funny one, really. He's had two really injury-hit seasons. I thought he was really good in that first year with Blackpool in the Championship. Since that point, not quite been up to those standards. Has had a few games this season where he's looked a bit more dangerous for Blues. Between those two for him, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I'll put him in C tier. I do think when he's fully fit, he's got a bit more about him than some of these D tier players. Josh Bowler, bit of a funny one as well. Blown very hot and cold during his spell with Cardiff. with that being said, is a player who I have rated in the past. That first year at Blackpool especially, he was absolutely fantastic, and there was a reason why Nottingham Forest spent all that money on him. 1v1 dribblers in the Championship. When he's on form, there aren't many players better than him. Final product is a little bit suspect at times though. For me personally, I would chuck him in B tier, but I'd be interested to know if Cardiff fans would agree with that. He's not always had the easiest of times. Tyrese Dolan at Blackburn, bit of a one that blows hot and cold as well. Good impact player from the bench. The thing that goes against Dolan when I'm ranking him is he never seems to have a good game against North End. So in the flesh, I've never really seen Dolan be that impactful. His goal contributions for the minutes that he play are generally quite decent, but I think I'd chuck him into C tier maybe. Edozie at Southampton, top end of B tier, definitely someone with a lot of potential, knocking on A tier to get there in the future. Ryan Fraser, another one I'm between A and B tier. The only thing that goes against Fraser is he doesn't tend to start many matches for Southampton. I think he's only started about 10 or 12 matches this season, something like that. Very useful player off the bench who can always come up with a moment or two. A and B, I'm going to chuck him in B tier for the time being. Mehmeti at Bristol City, someone who blows quite hot and cold. I actually think he's quite an entertaining player to watch. He's got a nice drop of the shoulder. When Bristol City came to Deepdale earlier this season, I did think he was one of their brighter sparks that I was looking towards, but final product at times can be a little bit inconsistent. Probably put him in C tier. I think he's just a solid Championship winger. Nathan Broadhead, based on this season, I think I'd have to have him in A tier. Been one of the driving forces behind the Ipswich side with some of the most goal contributions in that Kieran McKenna side. I'd have him in A tier. Josh Koroma, someone who can blow a little bit hot and cold. Really good breakthrough season. Since that point has been a little bit up and down. Rediscovered his magic a little bit more this season. Probably have him in C tier. Ilias Chair at QPR, wouldn't have him down as maybe an out-and-out winger. I know he does play wide a lot, but likes to drift into those central positions. For me personally, I think I would have him down as an A-tier player. Very good, nimble on the ball, has a lot of attributes which go his way. Nice dribbler, got a decent shot, and goal contributions are always fairly solid as well. His QPR teammate, Chris Willock, bit of a tough one to place. I don't think he's been at his firing best throughout this season. He's had quite a few patches of inconsistency. His goal contributions on top of that haven't been as strong as they usually would. With all that being said, I think I'd probably have him in the B tier. I don't think he's quite the player that Chair is, but on his day can be a game changer at this level. Very effective. Paul Smythe at QPR, probably in the C tier. I think that's a fair judgment of the QPR wingers. Remember him having a decent game, to be fair, when QPR came to Deepdale back in around about December. But I'd say that's a fair sort of ranking for those three players. Vidigal at Stoke City started out really well. Since the opening few months of the season, though, hasn't quite been the same player, certainly in terms of his goal return and things like that. A little bit more inconsistent since that point. Probably have him in the C tier. Haksabanovic, I'd probably have C tier as well. Manhove, early signs from him do look fairly promising, but do you know what? I probably haven't seen enough of him to make a definitive judgment on him. I think he only played about 10 minutes against Deepdale earlier in the season, and since that point, I've not had that many chances to watch him over a full 90 minutes, so probably wouldn't be fair to judge him as of yet. Bae-Jun Ho, I'm going to put into the B tier. Really like the look of him. Decent, nifty winger. When Stoke came to Deepdale a few weeks ago, thought he was one of their best players. Goal contributions are getting better as well. Definitely one to watch out for in the future. Still at a very good young age as well. Patrick Roberts at Sunderland. Where do we go with you? Last season, I would have had him at a B tier at a minimum. Very good dribbler. Obviously likes to cut inside onto that left foot. This season, though, I'm dropping him down to a C tier. He's only got 2 goal contributions. He has been a little bit inconsistent, actually very inconsistent in terms of his end product. Nice player to watch, doesn't always back it up though. Mark Albrighton, probably having C tier these days, doesn't get that much football. Casey McAteer, going to put into the B tier. I think he's got a very bright future ahead of him. Looking forward to seeing more of him in these years to come. Chipped in with a few decent moments for Leicester this season as well. Marcel at Leicester, someone that I've not really seen enough of to make a definitive judgment, so I'll put him into the haven't seen category. Ballymumba at Plymouth, I'd put into the B category. I think good pickup from Plymouth in the summer. I think he's proven to be a good signing for them. Still more to come from him as well. I think could get even more consistent in terms of his end product. Morgan Whittaker, where am I going to go with you? I mean, it's definitely between the top 2 tiers for Morgan Whittaker. He's a bit of a funny one to judge for me because do I think Whittaker is as good as a footballer as some of these players on the S tier? Maybe not in terms of his all-around game. I think he's still got quite a few attributes to develop on. So from that perspective, I'd probably have him in the A tier. But then you look at his goal contributions this season and what he's done for a Plymouth side that have been bottom half of the Championship, you'd have to have him in the A tier. 19 goals this season and a bucket load of assists to go along with that as well. Do you think it's worth flagging up that maybe his performances in the second half of the season haven't quite been as strong as the performances in the first half of the season? That being as a consequence of a few things, maybe change of manager's style, which hasn't suited him as much. But yeah, I'm between these top 2 tiers for Whittaker. Still think he's got a way to go to develop his overall game to get onto this level, but goal contributions wise, you can't really question it, can you? Wes Burns, I'd have B tier, very solid winger for Ipswich. Scored that lovely goal earlier in the season as well, which went on to win the Goal of the Season award. Harness, probably having the C tier, a bit more of an impact sub for Ipswich these days, isn't he? Callum O'Dowda, someone who I'd probably have in the C tier as well. Carlan Grant. Where am I going to put Carlan Grant? I mean, in years gone by, I would have probably had him in A tier, certainly based on his Huddersfield days in that first season with West Brom. Fell off a little bit since then, but maybe has rediscovered a little bit of magic this season with Cardiff. I think he has been more consistent in the Cardiff shirt than he was during his last season with West Brom. I'll put him in B tier for the time being, I think. Arnold Hernandez, probably C tier player. Really like Hernandez, obviously a great player in years gone by, but not that impactful these days. Christian Fassnacht at Norwich City. Tough one to judge. He's not the sort of winger that gets you up and out of your seat, like a lot of these other players maybe do, but considering the minutes he's played this season, his goal contributions return has been fairly solid. Probably stick him into the B tier. I think that's all the Norwich players that I've ranked now. With Norwich fans, would you say that's a fair estimation of your wingers? Jamal Lowe at Swansea can play quite a few positions, down the middle or on the wing. Maybe not as good as he once was. I think I'd still chuck him into the B tier though. I think he can still be a difference maker at this level and is on par with a lot of players on this tier. Malik Wilkes at Sheffield Wednesday. Enjoyable player to watch in years gone by. These days in the Championship, probably not as effective. Willie Gnonto, definitely an A tier standard player. Been a somewhat frustrating season for Gnonto maybe. A lot of minutes obviously coming off the bench, but when he has been given that starting chance, a lot of the times he has taken advantage of that. Really effective, low centre of gravity, definitely got a career waiting in the Premier League. Talent wise, I think he's probably an A tier player, certainly showcased that in his Bournemouth days and when they were promoted from the Championship. Really like the look of him, but this season hasn't really had that much of a look in at Leeds. He's mostly been an impact sub sort of player, so I'd probably drop him down to B tier maybe. Matty Phillips from West Brom, getting on now a little bit, but you know what? I still think he's got something about him. When West Brom came to Deepdale earlier this season, he absolutely tore us apart. Think that as an impact player, he can be really effective. Where would I place him? Do you know what? I still think he's better than the majority of players in the C tier. I'd have him somewhere in the B tier still, I think. Tom Fellows at West Brom, really like the look of. I think there's potential for him to move into the A tier in the future. For the time being, probably have him B tier. Mikey Johnston, I'm going to have in A tier. Fairly short sample size of matches that I'm judging him by, but been really impressed with him. Thought he was really effective in that game against Leicester last time out, albeit didn't get a goal or assist, but I still think he finds a way to contribute. And yeah, scored some great goals this season as well. Looking forward to seeing more of him in these years to come. Isaiah Jones at Middlesbrough. Where do I go with him? I'm between B and A. I think that maybe he's still got that bit of inconsistency to his game that maybe some of the wingers in A tier don't quite have. But I definitely think that Middlesbrough are a much better side with him in it. I have him close to the top of B tier, I think, for Isaiah Jones. Absolutely ripped North End apart when we went to the Riverside earlier this season. Really fast, dynamic player who can play anywhere down that right-hand side. Like I say, still maybe that bit of inconsistency to his game, but I'm a big fan of Isaiah Jones personally. Greenwood, I'd probably have C tier. Don't think he's quite on the level of the B tier players that we've got up here. Marcus Forss, I wouldn't say he's an out-and-out winger, but obviously has played quite a bit out on that right-hand side. Considering the minutes he's played in the Championship, his goals per minute ratio is really quite strong. Struggle with injuries like a lot of Borough players have of late. I'd have him close to the top of B tier. I think maybe on a similar level with Jones. Really clinical in taking his chances. Would just like to see a more regular run of games from him, I think. Riley McGree at Middlesbrough. Really injury-hit season. Wouldn't say he's an out-and-out winger either, but obviously likes to drift into those central positions. When fully fit, you can tell what a player Middlesbrough have got there. Have liked the look of him when I've seen him up close and personal as well. Do you know what? I'd give him the benefit of that. I think I would go A tier with him. I think if you got a fully fit season out of him, 46 games in the Championship, his goal contributions will be really solid. Just a shame that he's missed so much of this season through injury like a lot of Borough players have. Ken Sema, still quite like. I would go C tier. I think solid Championship player at this stage of his career. Struggling a little bit with some of the Sheffield Wednesday boys and where to rank them. We've got Poveda, Gassama and Musaba to rank here. On their day, all of them can be game changers, but I think you'd argue, I mean, definitely in the case of Gassaba and Musaba, there's still a little bit of inconsistency within their game, which is probably to be expected given the age of both players. Like, they fluctuate a lot in this list, from being capable of being like top end of B to bottom end of C, maybe even D sometimes, with how ineffective they can be, but like that, they can just make a moment happen. I'd probably have all of them fluctuating somewhere towards the top of C tier. I think in years to come, there's definitely more to come from those players, but right now, that bit of inconsistency just leaves them a tier below the majority of players I've got already in this B tier, I think. Ryan Hedges had a bit of a frustrating season for Blackburn with injury. When fully fit, do think he's quite a tidy player though. I'd have him B tier just about, I think. Sammy Silvera at Middlesbrough, probably C tier player, solid Championship player. Quite a few of his minutes have come from the bench this season though, not been a regular starter for Borough. Bacuna at Birmingham, a player that I do rate very highly. Wouldn't say he's much of a winger though, certainly not an out-and-out winger. Can play all over the pitch really for Blues, but goal contributions this season have been really solid from him. B tier at a bare minimum for Bacuna. I'd have him somewhere in there maybe if I was ordering the tiers. Siriki Dembele is a bit of a tough one to judge because he can be quite inconsistent, but when you catch him when he's in the mood, I do like the look of him. Obviously, really low centre of gravity, nippy player that can get about the pitch. Maybe his best years are behind him. Obviously, really effective in his Peterborough days. Decent impact in the short spell he had at Bournemouth as well. Up and down this season for Blues. I'd have him bottom end of B tier, I think, though. I still do like Dembele, especially when he is on song. Miyoshi, I think I'd chuck into top end of C, bottom end of B, between those two ones for Miyoshi, really. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I have liked the look of him when I've seen him live. Amari Hutchinson at Ipswich Town. Took him a little bit of time to settle in there under Kieran McKenna, but I think especially since the turn of the year, his performances have been at a really good standard. Top end of B, bottom end of A. I'd give him the benefit of the doubt. I think I would put him in A tier. I think that there's a hell of a player in there, and in the years to come, definitely a Premier League player in waiting. Sarmiento at Ipswich, bit of a trickier one to judge. Didn't get that much of a chance at West Brom in the first half of the season, but still produced a couple of moments. And then at Ipswich as well, he's mostly been utilised as an impact sub. Maybe bottom end of B for Sarmiento. Would like to see a bit more from him maybe before I make a definitive judgment on him. Like I say, a lot of his minutes have come from the bench. Vanujic at Coventry, not much of an out-and-out winger, more of a fullback / wing back. With that being said, do like him. I chuck him into the B tier, I think. Apologies to the Rotherham boys, but I think I'm going to chuck them all into the D tier. None of them have had a substantial impact in a side which will go down as one of the worst in Championship history. Sam Nombe had a little bit more hopes for him at the start of the season, but hasn't really clicked for him with the Millers so far. Scott Twine, where do we go with you? he's an interesting one. I think there is an argument that Burnley maybe overpaid for him in the first place. Had a few loan spells out to the Championship since that point, a spell with Hull and now with Bristol City as well. Do still think there is a good player in there. We'll be interested to see if Bristol City try to sign him on a permanent basis. I think I'd have him fluctuating in the B tier. I think would still be a fair estimation of Twine's abilities right now. Slimani at Southampton, a bit of an underwhelming sign really, given all the money Southampton splashed on him. Not been that much of a regular starter this season either. Probably C tier for him. David Brooks at Southampton, definitely an A tier standard player. Everything that Brooks has gone through to come back from that point is absolutely magnificent. Obviously been a great player in the Championship in years gone by with Sheffield United and Bournemouth as well. Now on loan with Southampton, chipped in with a few good moments for them in the second half of the season. Check for that day and Martins at Watford, maybe C tier for both of them. Looking at where I've got the other Watford players, I've got Emmanuel Dennis in A, and then with him in B, I don't think these two are quite at that same standard, so maybe around top of C for both of them. Longman at Millwall, I think is fine. Standard Championship player. SA, one for the future really. A lot of his minutes have come from the bench this season. Do you think there is a good player in there? He has come up with a few moments for Millwall this season. Will I have him in D or C? Potential wise, I'll chuck him into the C category. Not Cruffy, probably C. On top of that as well, I'm chucking all the Millwall boys in there. Not really an out-and-out winger, is he? More of a wing-back / right midfielder, I'd say. Sykes from Bristol City, probably upper C tier for him. I think with Sam Bell at Bristol City, probably the same tier, maybe a little bit lower down for him, I think would be fair. Moran and Sigurdsson from Blackburn, honestly, probably got them at a similar level to Dolan. I think I'd have them all in and around the C tier. Probably, as of right now, for Rovers. Obviously, they've not had the best season this time around. Placheta in at Swansea at the moment. Another one I'd probably chuck in C tier. Left a lot in this range towards the end of the video. Havana Laris in at Stoke, I'd have C tier. Barr, I think, is a C tier player at Sunderland. Mundell, someone that I've not really seen enough of to make a definitive judgment on, so I'll put them in haven't seen for the time being. Amir at Hull City, haven't seen a great deal of him, but the bits that I have seen, I do think he looks like a tidy player compared to the other Hull City players I've got on this list. Do you know what? I'd have him in the B tier. I think he does look a tidy player. At Gunn at Leicester, hard to make a definitive judgment on him. Haven't seen loads of him this season. Obviously, most of his minutes have come from the bench. If I had to put him into a tier, probably looking at C again for him. Bundu obviously scored that massive goal against Leicester. Most of his minutes have come from the bench this season. Probably another one in for the C tier. Haven't seen enough of him to make a definitive judgment on. Early days with Ronald, but you know what? That brace away at Sunderland, I think it was, still stands out to me. I'll give him the benefit of that. I'll put him in B tier for the time being, but haven't seen a whole load of him, I must admit. Now the question is, do I move around any of these players? Am I happy with everyone in the tiers that I've currently got them in? Because I do feel like a bit of movement is maybe required. That C tier is looking a little bit stacked. I think I'll have to move some players down to the D tier. I think the SA maybe gets moved down to the D tier for the time being. I'm not sure he's quite on the level of those players just yet. Obviously still a very young and raw player that will get better. Keshi Anderson, another one that does stand out to me in the C tier that I'm thinking maybe to move down. Hasn't done much over these last few years now, has he? Mostly because of injuries, to be fair. But at the top end of the list, I'm still considering whether Whittaker is S tier or he's top end of A. I just think that these players here have a little bit more to their all-around game than maybe Whittaker does, but his goal contributions this season have been so good for Plymouth. Obviously, all of these tiers aren't completely in order, but generally speaking, I think I'm fairly happy with that. I'm sure you guys will let me know in the comments down below any stinkers that I have had in this tier list. Anyone you think I've been too kind to or maybe a little bit too harsh on, let me know down below. But for the time being, I think I'm sticking with that. I think I'm fairly happy with that. That will wrap it up for today's video though, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you did go in to enjoy, make sure to leave a like, and I'll see you all in the next one.